this is Jenna Burt, host of the Confessions of a Military Spouse podcast. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey everyone, it's Selena, and you're listening to Stories from Planet Earth, and I'm here today with Jules.
Hello!
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, this is actually my first virtual interview, so you're kind of my guinea pig, so hopefully this goes well.
This is my first ever virtual podcast as well, so we'll be going through it together.
Yes, definitely. All right. So I always ask my guests first, where are you originally from?
I am originally from a very small city in northwestern Ohio called Lima. And our town mascot is a lima bean with a baseball cap.
Oh, that's perfect. I love that.
Yeah.
And so you end up coming to Colorado.
Well, first I lived in Michigan for 4 years, and then I got really sick of the snow. So I was like, okay, I think I'm going to move out and be with my brother in Colorado because he lives out here. And I just kind of fell in love, and I think I'll be here forever.
Yeah, Colorado is a beautiful, beautiful place.
It's pretty awesome. I'm from the Midwest, and we all like to come out here, so.
Yeah, I've actually never been to the true blue Midwest before, so I have no idea what it's like up there.
You're not missing out.
So I've heard. So what is your favorite part of Colorado and Denver so far?
I would say my favorite part of Denver is Cap Hill, where I live. And then my favorite part of Colorado is Grand Lake. My uncle has a place up there, and it's really, really beautiful.
That's awesome. I don't even think I've heard of that before. Where is that?
It's up in the mountains, past Winter Park.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That area is really, really gorgeous.
It's so pretty. You can just drive a boat through the mountains because the mountains are like literally coming out of the lake. It's gorgeous.
Wow, yeah. I think that's the great part about Colorado is I've lived here my whole entire life, but I still am discovering new little places throughout it all the time.
I think that's so cool. And it's probably the same thing in Ohio, but just like not as exciting.
Right, yeah. I can imagine it's pretty flat there.
Extremely. And it's pretty flat in Michigan too, especially the lower mitten part. But up north in the UP, it's actually pretty hilly and it's gorgeous.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it there.
Yeah, if you ever go to the UP and hang out with the Yoopers, definitely go to Mackinac Island.
Okay, I will definitely try to remember that. So did you go to college up in Michigan, you said?
No, I actually went to college at the University of Dayton in Ohio. So I'm a flyer, but I met a guy there and we dated for 3 years, and he went to optometry school in Michigan, so I ended up moving there, and then we broke up 5 months later because that just happens.
Ooh, yeah.
But that's how I ended up living in Michigan. And I lived with 5 guys in a big 6-person house, and I really liked it there, so I just stayed.
Cool. So then what brought you out to Colorado? You said your brother.
Yeah.
So did you start your work that you do now when you got to Colorado?
I actually worked at another behavioral health hospital before I worked at the hospital I work at now, and it wasn't a good fit. And I think it does take some strength to admit that, but I loved the behavioral health hospital I worked at in Michigan. It was a child and adolescent unit. It was wonderful, and I had a fantastic team. But I feel like everything's come full circle because I really like the work that I do now. Just about the same. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. What exactly do you do for work?
So I work on a medical stabilization unit for eating disorders, and we are the only unit of our kind in the United States. So people come from all over the world to get healthy again to my unit. I'm just really honored to work on a unit that's so unique and brings so many different personalities and so many different cultures in the same place.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's just such an interesting environment to work in. What does a typical day look like for you and your work?
So I work a 12-hour shift. So I go in at 7 and I leave at 7:30. Typically, I will walk to work. And then right now during quarantine and the social distancing times, we've been standing outside the patient's room to wait for report. But usually we're in a giant conference room, all of the CNAs and the charge nurses together. And they basically tell us how the patient has been doing recently, if we have not been with the patient, or how they did through the night shift. So I work with patients on a one-to-one basis. So I have one patient throughout the day that I spend 12 hours with in that patient's room that they're staying with in at the hospital. And I essentially am there to support them, reinforce positive environments and thought processes, and basically monitor them through the day for their safety and making sure that they're completing their meals.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. You're paired with an individual.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you get to know these patients really well.
You really do. You get to build some good rapport. I mean, if they're open to it. Sometimes patients want nothing to do with you, which is a really hard 12-hour shift. But oftentimes, you do get to know your patients really well. And in that same vein, it's difficult to hold boundaries. So I've learned so many new things at this job because it's very different from the milieu environments that I worked in previously.
And how so?
In a milieu-based treatment center, there are several patient care advocates. I'm a behavioral health technician, but there are several of us per patient. So maybe I would have, the ratio is 1 to 15, I think, legally. So maybe I would have 15 patients under my name and then so. So there are multiple patients that you're taking care of as opposed to one.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Are you currently in school?
I am in school. I am taking my pre-nursing prerequisites right now. I would like to be a psychiatric nurse and then eventually a psychiatric nursing practitioner.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What piqued your interest in this field?
I have a psychology degree. I have a bachelor's in psych. I guess I've always been interested in mental health because I have struggled with it myself my whole life. So it's just something that I am interested in and the way people think and why they think the way they think. And I'm always asking myself questions. Why did that person do that? And it's the same thing like we were talking about true crime earlier. That's what interests me in true crime too, just the psychological aspects of why, what, who, when, where.
Yeah, what makes a person who they are.
Yeah.
It is really, really interesting to me.
Personality psychology is really, really interesting. If you take the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram, you just learn so much about yourself.
Yeah, I love those.
Me too.
Sometimes I took recently, I think, the Enneagram, and I feel like I need to take a better version of it because I don't agree with that one. But most of the time I do agree with the results I get from those.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Some of those tests aren't very accurate, but usually I get INFP, ENFP for Myers-Briggs, and I always get type 4 for Enneagram. So
yeah, I think I got a type 8 for the Enneagram, which I just don't agree with. For the Myers-Briggs, I always get the same one. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but that one's crazy accurate.
So accurate. Yeah, isn't that interesting how, but there are so many different types of personalities that you can't really just put yourself in a box because everybody is individual.
Right. And some like multifaceted depending on, your background and just a stuff. It's so fascinating. I wish I would have studied psychology more in college. I was kind of thinking about going into psychology while I was in high school, but then I went with communications just because I was indecisive. But it's so interesting getting to talk to someone who is in that field.
Absolutely. And I think that communications is a smart way to go because I didn't actually use my degree until I think like 3 to 4 years after I graduated. So
I've heard it's a tough one if you're not continuing school right away.
It is a tough one for sure.
What is it like working in the healthcare industry in the midst of a global pandemic?
I would definitely say it's kind of anxiety provoking as there are so many employees on my unit. We have over 150 employees that come in and out of my unit on a week to bi-weekly basis. So there are a lot of us. And also it's nerve-wracking to work on a unit where I don't know if I could be passing something along to my patients. I don't want to pass anything on to my patients because they are super immunosuppressed as a result of their eating disorder, just wrecking their immune system. So they would be very unlucky if they were to get COVID-19, which is, I think, the scariest thing for me as I don't work in the main hospital. I work on the eating disorder unit. It's just like, because when they come to us, they are so sick. Like, it's jarring. It's honestly so jarring to see how sick they are when they come in. But yeah, it has been kind of scary.
I could imagine. It's scary just going about your daily life. So I could only imagine being in an environment where you're interacting one-on-one with very sick people and you're worried about your own health at the same time as worrying about keeping these people healthy as well. So that's just so anxiety provoking. I can't imagine.
Yeah. And plus we've had some employees that have tested positive. So we're just all trying to stay healthy and keep our hands clean. And we also have to wear masks for 12 hours a day, which is like probably honestly one of the worst parts about this whole thing, because you're breathing in your own breath for 12 hours and you're using the same mask that's only meant for 30 minutes for 5 days in a row. And you're just like, this sucks.
Yeah, I could imagine. So I applaud you for, doing that work because it's really important right now.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's been really heartwarming to get all of the appreciation from people, because I feel like until something like this happens, people don't really realize that how hard people in healthcare work.
Right. Yeah. And I think hopefully that will carry on past this pandemic, where we're remembering the people that we're calling essential workers, and we're carrying that support that we've placed in all of y'all right now into the future.
Yeah. And not even just healthcare workers, but grocery store workers, restaurant workers. Like, we need to be praising all of these people because they are truly putting themselves on the front line. I think even more so than myself at the grocery stores to help people get what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm really hoping that we see more respect given to all of the people right now who are on the front lines of this.
Me too. Spread the love.
Yes, please. So my next question, how are you taking care of yourself while you're taking care of others?
That is actually something that Colin, my boyfriend, and I have discussed today while we were on our walk. Basically, mental health during this time has been kind of a struggle for me because I am working a pretty emotionally draining job and also dealing with all of the media and all this emotionally draining information that's just like an onslaught all the time. And family members having, I guess, opposing views on how to deal with it and whether it's serious or not. And it just is causing a great amount of anxiety. So I have been trying to create art as much as possible, read when I have spare time. We've been walking almost 3 miles every day if we can, drinking lots of water, getting the proper amount of sleep. It just really all comes down to getting into a routine and staying on your self-care.
Yeah, definitely. It can be difficult just generally to remember to take care of ourselves. So now more than ever, I think it's so important, especially in having a job that you have, just to remember to put your own self in the equation and, take some time for yourself. So I'm glad to hear that you're taking those steps to make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well.
Thank you. It really has been difficult, but sometimes I need to just ground myself and really feel my feet against the ground and take a couple deep breaths before I go into my patient's room and kind of like clear myself before I can take on, I guess, them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like, you can't really, there's a quote I really like. You can't like pour from an empty cup.
Yes. I love that one too.
Yeah. So it's always important to be sure that we're filling our own cups and, trying our best at least to, tend to our inner selves as well.
I really agree with that. And I also always try to instill that in my patients that sometimes they just, because I have a lot of patients who don't want to let go of control, they want to grasp onto their regular life and they are freaking out about school. And I'm like, hey, you need to realize that your health and your treatment comes first here. And you can't return to regular life until you yourself are okay.
Right. Yeah. And that's probably one of the hardest aspects, I'm sure, for many of the patients to like kind of give themselves that time to heal. Right.
And I think it applies to this whole quarantine as well. I mean, my patients are basically in quarantine. I mean, essentially, they're stuck in a room all day with one other person. They can only walk around in the hallways a couple times a day. Sometimes they can go for an outing, but they really can't communicate with a lot of other people. And That's what quarantine is right now. And I just tell them like, hey, I'm in your shoes right now. And I know it sucks. And I know I'm not a mental health hold, but I mean, I understand where you're coming from and I try to put myself in their shoes, but I think that's something that everybody in quarantine can kind of take away from this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned briefly that you're focusing on creating more. I know that you have some amazing art up on Instagram. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that, like your art and your process there.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling it amazing. I have always loved art. My grandma was an art therapist on a psych ward back in the day. So I feel like that might have been the 80s. And she worked on the psych ward for a long time doing art therapy with them, which is so cool. And she used to come over all the time because they lived at the lake and we lived in the city. So she would stay at our house and she'd teach me how to draw when I was really little. So we just sit at my drawing table together at these tiny chairs that she just probably very uncomfortably sat at with me. And she taught me how to draw dogs and clowns and lions and all kinds of stuff. So I guess that's been deeply ingrained in me for most of my life. And I've just always loved to draw.
That's really amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
Art therapy. That's amazing. So when did you start your actual Instagram art page?
I've done it on and off for like a long time. And then I couldn't keep up with it for a long time. I was just going through a lot, and I hated the job that I was working. I was working at a financial institution the first time I created my Instagram art page. And I was really depressed and hated working in a cube farm. So I deleted it because my anxiety was just like through the roof. So I decided, my friend Alina actually was like, hey, your art is really good. You need to create an Instagram for this because I'd love to see it all in the same place. So she inspired me to get an account again. And thank you, Alina. But yeah, I don't know. I think creating is something that is so individual to each and every person. And it's probably one of the coolest things in my life.
Yeah, I think art in any capacity creating is just so important. And I love seeing the people around me create. I think it's just so wonderful. It's like a little peek inside someone else's brain sometimes.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about it. I love to get together with my friends, my friend Lily, and we like to teach each other stuff on the iPad because we like to use Procreate. So we'll teach each other things and just kind of sit near one another and draw, which is just really relaxing.
Yeah, that's so nice. I love, those are my favorite kind of hangouts when you're just, with your friends painting or, doing a craft. Those are always so much fun.
It's also like a way to recharge for me. I feel like that's what I need to do when I'm feeling really down. And that's something that is not really accessible to me right now. So I need to find a way to supplement that, this is kind of that right now. This is us creating together, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool, right? I think that's kind of why I started the podcast in the first place, if I'm honest. Like, before I was laid off from my last job, I was kind of really consumed by all of it.
Yeah.
It was a startup company, and it was really demanding, and I just was putting a lot of my energy into that. And I didn't have as much time or like as much motivation to sit down and physically create. And so this is like a conversation between two people. And that's what I love about it. It seems like a lot less taxing. So it was a good way to kind of get my foot back into creating something. So
yeah, and podcasting is so much fun because it is a conversation between two people, but it's also people telling a collective story and creating a new one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great segue too. You had a podcast, which I just found out before we were on here.
Yes, I did have a podcast. It ran for almost a year. It's called Fear and Fame. And it was really fun. It was something that a friend and myself could create together. And we had a lot of fun telling the stories and laughing and drinking wine. And it was just something that it was a way to create without having to paint or make a mess, It was just fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love podcasts. That's another big reason why I started my own, is just because I consume so many podcasts. So it's cool that you made one too. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'd like to get back into it someday, but right now school and work are just like, it's kind of my whole life, and I'm happy with that. So I think I'm just gonna hop on other people's podcasts.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so happy you agreed to hop on mine.
Well, thank you for asking me. It warmed my heart. I needed this, I feel like.
Good. I'm glad that I could provide that then. So kind of shifting back to your art, I was wondering if you have a favorite piece you've ever created.
Oh man, I'll have to think about that. I really like the one with the mask. I was very proud of that one. The girl with the space buns and the mask. Yeah, I think that was one of my favorite ones that I've probably ever done digitally, but there are a few of my favorites that I haven't shared that I've done with watercolor. But I definitely still love my Whiskey Girl drawing. That one's pretty close to my heart.
Yeah, that one's really cute too.
I actually originally, that's a redraw of a painting that I did back when I was living in a house with 5 guys. One of them was just like breaking my heart, and I was listening to Alanis Morissette. And one of her songs, the lyrics says, "I don't want to be your glass of whiskey in your bottom drawer." And that's how I was feeling. So that's what I kind of came up with, a sad girl in lingerie sitting in a glass of whiskey.
I love that.
Yeah.
We create the best art whenever we're in our feels, don't we?
I was sure in my feels, girl.
And so I also wanted to talk a little bit about the art challenge that you have going on right now.
Yeah, that's been super fun to do. My friend Lily and I really wanted to do an art challenge that would inspire people during the pandemic to kind of learn about the history of medicine and why we do the things that we do, but also inspire them to create amidst all the anxiety.
Yeah, I think that's so cool and so needed. Going back to like the self-care thing, it's giving people a prompt to create alongside other people.
Yeah, and it's been really cool to see what everybody's been creating. My friend Anthony from high school has been creating stuff for the challenge, and his are really creepy. It's like nightmare fuel, but in a good way, you know. I like the creepy stuff. But yeah, I've kind of fallen behind due to just stress and anxiety, but I think the way Lily and I are approaching it is a very like nonchalant kind of chill. You don't have to do it on the same day every day, as long as you have inspiration for your next art piece. So
my next question, you don't have to answer this, by the way. I just noticed that you post a lot about MLMs on your Instagram, turning people away from them. Could you kind of let me in on why you're so passionate about educating people around that topic?
That is a very good question. I actually get this question quite a bit. More so, I feel the need to educate people because I have personally had people in my life who have been impacted negatively by MLMs. I have never joined one, but I know a lot of people who have been burned by these companies because they are scams and they are just meant to set people up for failure. And that's truly what I believe. When I was a blogger and a model, I used to get a lot of people in my DMs trying to manipulate me into joining their MLM. And it was just super inauthentic. And I feel like they were trying to use me to further their own MLM career.
Yeah, absolutely. I've gotten a few of those, "Hey, babe," Instagram messages.
Yes. "Hey, girl, I know this is super random." That kind of stuff.
I was noticing your timeline, and I think that you'd be a great fit for blah, 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 blah.
Exactly. And it's just like, girl, stop lying. You know, I would be terrible at that. It's just really frustrating. And it got super annoying after a while. And then one day I was working as a barista at a bakery in Michigan. And this girl came up to me and we were having a conversation, and it seemed like we were like, maybe I was going to have a new friend. And that was super exciting because all my friends were dudes. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, your skin is amazing. What kind of skincare do you use? Blah, blah." And I was like, I told her what skincare I used. And she was like, "Ew, don't use oils on your skin. It's so bad for your skin. Here's my card. You should get Mary Kay." And I threw her card in the trash. And that was it.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me before too. I had someone approach me in King Soopers like a few months ago. And I thought I was about to have a friend too. She was like, oh, like, going, like, we were looking at the same shelf and she's like, oh, do you know what this is? And we just kind of like started chatting and she's like, oh, what do you do for work? And I was like, oh, here we go.
Here we go. It's just honestly really gross. And I don't know, it just feels super scummy that these people would do that. And then they would ask you to sell to all your family members. And then especially for them to take advantage of people during a global pandemic and think that's okay. Like, it's just disgusting. But yeah, that's the gist of why I hate MLMs. But if anybody's thinking of joining one, just send them over to me.
Okay, I'll be sure to send them right your way. So I think I might have mentioned this in the beginning, but you are a registered yoga teacher.
I am.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in 2017, I graduated to become a registered yoga teacher in Vinyasa, which is a flow type of yoga. You've probably done it at Core Power. I don't know if you've been to Core Power, but that's the type of yoga that I teach. I love power flow, but yeah, I'm also trauma informed as a yoga instructor. So I'm not trauma certified, but I can and know how to teach yoga to people who have been traumatized or had significant trauma in their lives. But yeah, I first just felt a calling to do yoga teacher training because I love yoga and I have practiced yoga for like 15 years of my life. So it's been really cool to grow my own practice through yoga teacher training. And I just remember the first time I ever had to teach a yoga class was by complete accident. I was working at the yoga studio at the desk. It was 6 a.m. on a Sunday, and the teacher didn't show up. I hadn't graduated yoga teacher training yet, and I was absolutely terrified to teach in front of people that to the point where I would cry. I had such bad stage fright. So I called my boss and I was like, Lauren, what do I do? And she's like a super hard ass. Like, she was like, well, kid, it's your time to shine. And she hung up on me. I had to teach the class. I was so scared. I almost threw up. I was kind of hungover. I went into the studio and I taught a 60-minute yoga class and I was never scared again.
Wow. So just kind of, you were thrown into it and then you just had to figure it out in the moment.
I was terrified and I thought I was going to throw up on the ladies' mat in front of me, but I was able to avoid that. And the yoga teacher apologized for not showing up and gave me a free pair of Madewell socks. So I got something out of it.
Well, and so how long ago did you get certified?
I've been certified for 3 years. I would like to teach again someday, but I haven't taught since I was a instructor at School of Mines.
Very cool. Yeah, that would definitely be, I've always wanted to get yoga teacher certified. So it's definitely on my list too.
Well, if you want to talk about it, I'm down anytime.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have any advice for people like me who want to get into it?
I would say if you have the money, I think it's worth the investment, even if you don't want to teach, because it is such a growing experience. It's just a personal growth experience that I don't think I will ever regret. And I love teaching yoga. There's nothing like getting done with a class and having somebody come up to you, sweat dripping down their face, and say, I really needed that today. Like, there's nothing like it. It's really nice.
Yeah, that is really amazing. What do you think your favorite part about just yoga in general, the practice, is?
I think my favorite part is the idea of marrying movement with breath. It's a really beautiful practice to be able to just focus on your breath along with the movements and kind of just feel your body in the moment in that place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once you really get into yoga and you learn how to just be still in that moment, it's just so amazing. And that's what made me fall in love with yoga, just taking my brain out of like my anxious, like,
yes,
like always kind of running brain. So it's such an amazing practice. And
yeah, it was definitely a weird time in my life because I was also working at the financial office. I was working at the yoga studio to save up enough money so I could quit. And I was taking yoga teacher training at the same time. So it was something that I really, really needed because this job, I would cry about it every single day. And I'm just really thankful for the people that I met during that time too. The people you meet in yoga teacher training will be some of your closest, just most authentic friends for a long time.
Well, all right. I think that is pretty much all I have for you. Just one final question. How can people connect with you and your work?
I feel like my work is mainly on social media, and I'm pretty transparent about most everything. So yeah, if anybody has any further questions, feel free to catch me on Instagram at 25AOUT1991 or psych.witch on Instagram. That's my art page. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Selena. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. And everybody go check out her Instagram. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Stories from Planet Earth. If you have some time, leave us a review and be sure to subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts. Find us on Instagram at SFPE Podcasts. I'll talk to you next week.